Everyone, and welcome. I'm Rick Noguchi, President and CEO of California Humanities. We're proud to host the Collective Joy Project, a new public dialogue series exploring how story, ritual, and culture can help us move through grief toward collective joy and future building. At a time when so much feels uncertain, we believe the humanities offer us tools to reflect, connect, imagine new possibilities together. So thank you for being here with us today, for showing up in this space, and for helping us center joy as a powerful practice. Now I'll turn it over to our Senior Program Officer, Mariana Moscoso, who will guide today's conversation. Take it away, Mariana.
Thank you so much, Rick. And hello, everyone. I'm Mariana Moscoso, pronouns ha, ella, they. And like Rick said, I'm the Senior Program Officer here at the California Humanities. I am so honored and excited to introduce my friend and colleague, Julio Salgado. Julio is a multimedia artist based in Long Beach, California. Julio's status as a queer immigrant has informed his vast body of political artwork, which can be seen in marches, community spaces, and institutions like the SFMOMA and the Smithsonian. He is currently a power building strategist at the Center for Cultural Power, where he co-created the Disruptors Fellowship, a program for emerging television writers of color who identify as trans, undocumented, or formerly undocumented, or disabled. Julio is a regular comic contributor for the LA Times, where you can find his comic strip, Good Immigrant, Bad Immigrant. Welcome, Julio.
Hi, Mariana. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
I know, me too. Oh, Julio, during these collective joy sessions, we usually begin by asking our guests what's bringing them joy. But today we're going to do something just a little different. And we're going to invite everyone who is live on Instagram and in the Zoom to also respond to this question. So if you could take a moment and into the chat, type what's something that's bringing you joy lately. It can be a sentence, a feeling, or even a moment. And if you're watching a recording of this session, we also invite you to share your joy in the comments. We would love to hear from you. And so while folks are responding to that in the chat, Julio, can I turn the question to you? What's something that's bringing you joy?
Yes. Thank you so much. Right now, one of and honestly, it's been something that I always turn to. Something that brings me joy is collaborating with friends, working with my friends. Right now, a project that I'm really fond of is that I've been doing is it's a podcast called Sonido Cumbiaton. A little plug here, but really, what Sonido Cumbiaton is it features my good Judy DJ Sissel and my best friend, one of my best friends, Jesus Iniguez. And we really get on to talk about what's happening right now with immigrants, but more than anything, we get to be together and we get to talk about not just being immigrants in this country, but just like how you doing, what's bringing you happiness, right? And so that's something that I've always done is with Jesus when I actually met my best friend Jesus in college. And back then we used to do zines together. And then after college, we used to do videos on YouTube. And then I met Cecil when I moved from the Bay Area back to LA. And, she was doing Cubiaton and I joined that, doing the flyers. And so being able to collaborate with your friends, sometimes there's money involved, a lot of times there's no money involved, but the fact that you get to come together and create, like, that's one of my biggest joy. And the fact that my friends let me be who I am, you can't put a price on that, and you can't put a price on a price on the joy that your friends give you.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Community, friends is such a deep source of joy. And I'm looking at some of the things that folks put into the chat. Yasmin said, nourishing the roots of my home. Sherry said, my dog, my plants, my queer communities and spaces. Vanessa says, long walks in nature.
Sí.
Edward says, writing about the late great activist Renee Templeton.
Mm.
Oh, I love these local bluegrass jams. Another Yasmin says, improving my art has been bringing me joy. Yes.
That's
Oh,
a good one. Being able to improve your art, whatever art, medium it is. Always going back and being like, oh, this is what I look at some of my pieces from like 15 years ago, and I'm like, oh, but look at the one that I did today, and it's great to see your own progress. It brings you joy.
yes, I know progress does bring joy. And speaking about drawing, today's theme, of course, is drawing belonging, queer joy, migration, and collective memory. And I'd love for you to share one of your artworks that speaks to that idea of belonging. And can you tell us the story behind it, what inspired it, how it holds joy, memory, or identity for you?
Yes. Last year, actually a couple of years ago, I started collaborating with Delos, which is a Latina initiative from the LA Times. Shout out to Delos, the Delos team. They're just fabulous and really wanting to amplify the stories of the Latina community, not just here in Los Angeles, but like really nationally, right? I've been very lucky to have been able to collaborate with different illustrating different things. And last year, I pitched this idea of a comic strip called "Good Immigrant, Bad Immigrant." And really, what this comic strip is, I call it my own Sex and the City column, but for immigrants, minus the fabulous shoes. And it really is, an open diary of my experiences as an immigrant. But what I've been, I've expand the comic strip to not just telling my own immigrant story, but the story of others. And the one that was just published last week. I had the honor of telling the story of Tsunami Muse. Tsunami Muse is, speaking of other joys, RuPaul's Drag Race is a huge, joy that is currently in my life. And Tsunami Muse was a contestant in the show in last year, season 16. And this earlier couple of weeks ago, she made an announcement that well, first of all, let me backtrack. During the show, a lot of the queens that come in the show, they share their stories of being queer and the family dynamics. People have shared a lot of the stories. But last year, for the first time, two queens, Tsunami Muse being one of them, the other one, Geneva Clark, shared their DACA stories, right? Their stories of having DACA, having this permit that Obama signed into law in 2012. And for me as a fan, seeing one of two drag queens sharing something that is deeply I connected with, I was like, oh my God, this is historic. It truly was historic, right? And so they share their story, and then one of the perks that comes with being part of the show is that you get to travel, right? Like you get gigs, international gigs. But when you have DACA, you don't, you actually are able to travel outside of the country with, a special permit called advance parole. But the process of getting advance parole is a long process, right? And so Tsunami, a couple of weeks ago, she shared on her Instagram that she was actually going to go back to Panama, where she's from. I don't know if you hear the ambulance. I'm sorry that I hear the ambulance. But anyway, so Tsunami announced that she was going to go back to Panama. And so I reached out to her and her team, and I was like, hey, I do this comic strip. The way that she talked about going back to Panama, it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm going back, like because of what's happening right now. But she took charge of her own life. And in a weird way, and we talked about this also in the last episode of Sonido Cumbiaton, where she moved from a place of like, I'm forced to do this to she made a choice to go back to Panama, right? And so I was like, can you, do you mind sharing the story? And so I interviewed her, and she shared her story of coming from Panama, moving to Brooklyn, and really any kid who is from who is an immigrant who came at a young age really relates to her story, right? And so yeah, the story came out, the comic strip came out, and I was only able to tell the story in 10 panels, but this is just one of the many stories, right? One of the many things that we as immigrants with various immigration status, even citizens, right, are thinking about, like, what is my future in this country? So yeah. Good Immigrant, Bad Immigrant is a monthly comic strip that I do, and I'm working on the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing the background of the comic strip. And that's so amazing that you got to interview her to, get from her directly her experience. Yeah, I read the comic strip this morning and it brought me to tears
Mm.
because it really exemplifies in agency, right? Like taking back our agency and being able to determine for ourselves what our future is going to be. And I love the way it ends is like, I'm going to be successful wherever I go. So that really resonated with me a lot. And so even like hearing you talk about like tsunami and this experience, right, about her experience specifically and how it relates to other folks that have DACA, I've noticed a lot of your work really holds the complexity of emotions of both grief and humor. And so, how has drawing been a way to process grief and still insist on joy?
I mean, I I have to. I have no choice. I think, I always say that there's a lot of things in life that one cannot control, right? In this case, policies, a lot of the times they're out of my hand. Losing someone, something horrible happening in your life. We do have to process whatever it is that is happening to you, but also what are the things that you can do, right? In my case, I can draw. Making a drawing for me, it's very important. What when it comes to grief, one of the somebody that comes to me a lot is my late Uncle Chicho, my tío Chicho, who unfortunately passed away in 2019. And my tío Chicho was the first gay man I ever met. He was my mom's brother. He actually migrated to the US in the early 90s. And, I never actually came out to my uncle. He actually self-deported back to Mexico in the early 2000s. And in the back of my mind, I was like, well, whenever I get back, I'm able to go back to Mexico, I'll come out to him, right? But I never had the opportunity to come out to him. He unfortunately passed. And he started coming to me in my dreams. And there was something about the relationship and what he meant to me, what he meant in my life, what he meant for this idea of being queer and an immigrant. I think people like my uncle, our ancestors now, really paved the way to where we are right now. Even though literally yesterday we just heard that the Supreme Court is, officially was asked to, take down gay marriage. I still look back at the life of my uncle and other queer immigrants, and I'm like, nah, like we come from like really strong queer immigrant ancestors, right? And I take that, and I remember a lot of the conversations with my uncle, it was a lot of laughing, a lot of jokes, a lot of shade. My uncle, my teacher was shady. She was a shady queen. But I loved him for that, and it really he unconsciously or consciously perhaps he made it okay for me to be my full self. And I think I'm enjoying the fruits of his queer labor, really, through my art. It really comes out through my art.
Yeah, that's so powerful, Julio. Yeah, thinking about the way our queer ancestors have paved the way for us to be in this present, and how much we can learn about their struggles and the way that they live their lives so that we can face the challenges that we're facing today. I think honoring our ancestors and the beautiful ways that you honor your ancestor through art is just absolutely inspiring.
And he's always talking to me. Like I always feel like through my dream and like in my dreams, he comes a lot in my dreams.
Yeah.
And he tells me, right, like, are you doing I've been working on a graphic memoir for the longest, it's and he comes to me and he tells me like, girl, what's happening? Are you working? Are you picking up, the work, right? And so I think it's important to listen to those dreams, those ancestors that come into our dreams.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it, but the dream space is part of that consciousness, right? Where all of our ancestors live, where the memory of all humanity and the universe lives.
Yeah.
And so many like different cultures think about creativity not as something that we own, but something that exists out there and arrives to us. So that really makes me think about like how art is a form of memory and archive, and how you're constantly illustrating people, moments, and movements. What's the relationship between drawing and remembering for you and for your communities, and why do you think it matters?
Yes, I mean, when I started doing a lot of this work, um, I'm, specifically in the immigrant rights movement, I was I specifically remember back in May of 2010, there was five immigrant students. They walk into McCain's office, the Layton Senator McCain's office, and in Arizona, and they did a civil disobedience. They did a sit-in, and they announced that they were undocumented and they were there, saying that, asking for support for the Dream Act, right? And so I remember seeing that, and then what happened afterwards, right? This A lot of us started sharing our stories as undocumented immigrants, and I really wanted to make sure that people did not forget who were the people leading a lot of this, a lot of what was happening. A lot of them, not the majority perhaps, but a lot of the folks leading many of these actions were queer and immigrant women, and so I wanted to ensure that people remember that, through images. And I started making one of the series that people remember me a lot for is the Undocu Queer series, and for those images, I really wanted to pay homage to different individuals that in different parts of the country, it meant different things, right? To be undocumented and queer in San Francisco, perhaps a little bit different, than in Georgia, or, in different parts of the country, right? Or not, right? It really, my experience was from somebody coming from Southern California. And so I really, the way that project came about, I went on Facebook and I was like, if you're undocumented and queer, tell me your story. And I want to collaborate with you. And a lot of people started sharing their images and their photos, and I was illustrating them, right? And so I think for me, that was a specific moment in time, that I look back to, and I'm like, again, right? Like, we come from resilient people. We've gone through horrible moments in time, and we need to remember where we come from and who we are. And so I think through my work, that is my intention behind it, to document what is happening and also I'm very intentional around using bright colors, as you can see some of my artwork in the background. A lot of the times when we think of our queer narratives or our immigrant narratives, a lot of the times, and for the right reason, right? They can be very sad, but there's also what we're here to talk about is the joy, and really, I use pinks and blues and yellows and oranges and greens because I want to make sure that people know that you are not gonna dim my light,
Yeah.
despite how hard many might try to do that. I want to be intentional around the brightness of my colors that I use. Not for everyone. Sometimes, I know I'm not the best artist in the world, but I'm gonna be intentional around using that. And I say that because somebody said that it reminds them of MS Paint. And I take the criticism. I'm like, perhaps, yeah. And it was funny because when I was in the seventh or eighth grade, I used to use MS Paint to draw. So perhaps
Oh, me too.
I was like, it's part of my artistic journey, MS Paint.
Oh yes, MS Paint, iconic. I wonder how many like digital artists used MS Paint and then were inspired because honestly, I did too. I was drawing my little stick figures and
Listen, that's why I think. I mean, right now, a lot of people who are on TikTok or YouTubers, they grew up with their phones, and so like they were used to being in front of a camera, and the really successful influencers or YouTubers or whatever, they were trained at a very young age unintentionally. So yeah, that was my training.
yeah, totally. I hear you. And your art's amazing. So whatever to those that have their criticism. But I also wanted to note, like, I really love this Undocuqueer series so much because it really is telling the story of folks beyond their trauma. And um, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like how people have responded to the series.
To the Queer series, for the most part, people were, I think it was positive, right? Like I think it really pushed the conversation, especially in queer spaces, right? Which at that time, which is interesting because we're talking about, I just mentioned gay marriage and the a lot of gay people thought that once gay marriage, oh, we're able to get married, like it's done, we have no more, we shouldn't be afraid. But the reality is that if you are different than we're constantly going to be attacked, right? And so at that time, the conversation for me also was about, like the different narratives within communities, right? Yeah, I'm queer, but I'm also this, and I'm also undocumented, and I'm also part of a community that's being detained. And similarly, in immigrant spaces, I wanted to make sure that the conversation around queerness was, people were bringing that up, right? Because a lot of the times in immigrant spaces, because of the religion, or the way that you were brought up, talking about being queer, was seen as not the best thing, right? And so like this really allowed to have those complex conversation. And so I think right now we are in a very divided time, and I want to go back to make sure that we talk about the different complexities, right? And that includes your Theo that voted differently. How are you going to talk to that Theo and explain to them about the complexities? And I think art really allows us to have that conversation, whether it's a comic book, a TV show, sprinkling it and really making it complex, right? And it's not easy. It's
Yeah.
not easy. And it's funny because we talk about humor, but writing comedy or writing humor, it's not easy. And so it really, one of the things that I do often is like before I post something or I share something, I have a close group of friends who will tell me the truth. And so I
Yeah.
think it's very important that you share your work before you share it with the world, to the close group of people who will be honest with you, because yeah, this conversations are really important to have, and through art there's a way to soften the conversation, and doing it in a way that also brings you joy and happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I'd be really remiss if I didn't acknowledge like this current moment of so many of us living in fear of being targeted and kidnapped by ICE. And obviously also the violent attacks against immigrants and queer folks. So, in the midst of all this, how do you think joy can function as a tool for our collective liberation?
Yeah, that's always a tough one, right? Too. How do you make art about joy when things are happening, right? And when you're speaking of the current all the raids that are happening, I remember in the when we start seeing it recently. I had just started a series called The Spice Girls Saved My Life, and in that series I wanted to have make portraits of younger selves, of us young queers, and what was the artist that made our childhood or teenagehood a little more bearable, right? And so I was in the midst of making that project, and then I started looking at what was happening, and I paused for a minute, but then I was like, I thought about again going back to my queer ancestors and what they went through, right? And I specifically focus on the work that ACT UP was doing in the early, late 80s, early 90s. ACT UP, for those of you who might not be familiar with them, they were, organizing around folks, fighting, AIDS and HIV, and making sure that people had access to medication and finding a cure, right? And so, but they were using art, and there was drag shows, there were all kinds of, so there was the people were dating, right? And so I think that it's important to focus on those on the complexity of issues that are happening in our communities. And so I kind of went back to the series of The Spice Girl Saved My Life, and I was asking different folks, different queer folks, I'm like, in moments like this, who is the artist that you turn to that brings you happiness? And I think finding that in artists, in other artists, was really important for my own sanity. Listening to the records that I listened to when I was 16, 17 years old was very important.
Yeah, that's so, yes, absolutely. We have to find ways to cultivate our own joy.
Yeah.
Julio, I am so grateful for you to having this conversation. It goes by so fast.
No.
But before we close, do you have anything you want to plug or share with folks, like upcoming project, ways people can support your work or follow what you're creating?
Yeah, I mean, my Instagram at Julio Salgado 83 is where I share all of my projects. Also, this new venture that with my friends DJ Sisto and Jesus Iñiguez, Sonido Cumbiaton. If you want to follow our Instagram, we're trying to post something new every 2 weeks, and we go deeper into these conversations, right, affecting immigrants during this time. So yeah, it's just like share the work, because only us, the people who are directly affected by a lot of these issues, have a real insight of what it's like. It's complex, and so I think it's important to kind of put it out into the world and have discussions about it. And so the good thing about it is that, again, anybody has access to it. The bad thing is that anybody has access to these things, and so you just have to protect your energy and not give energy to the people who just don't want good things for you. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Julio. And I want to invite folks, whether you're watching us live or the recording later, drop one word or emoji in the chat or in the comments to describe how this conversation made you feel today. We'd really love to know what your reflections are and continue the dialogue in the comments. So, Julio, again, thank you so much for sharing this time with me. You're an amazing artist and a friend, and I'm so happy to have shared this time with you. And to everybody else, don't forget to join us next month, Tuesday, September 9th at noon, when we'll be in conversation with culture bearer Tina Calderon from the Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples, where we'll be talking about land back and joyful reclamation. And until then, don't forget, joy is a strategy. Carry it forward. Bye, everyone.
Bye.